Class 8. Subject Social Studies, History. Lesson 3 Ruling the Countryside. Q1. Who and when did the permanent settlement introduced in Bengal? Ans. It was introduced by Lord Cornwallis in 1793. Q2. What role did women play in the cultivation of indigo? Ans. Women usually carried the indigo plant to the vats. Q3. Who were the Gomastas? Ans. They were the agents of planters. Q4. Who was William Morris? Ans. He was a famous poet and artist of 19th century Britain. Q5. Who created Kalmakari print? Ans. Weavers of Andhra Pradesh. Q6. What are the two main systems of indigo cultivation in India? Ans. Nij and Rioti. Q7. Who were the Latials? Ans. They were the lathi-wielding strongmen maintained by the planters. Q8. Where did the English cultivate indigo? Ans. In Jamaica. Q9. Where did the Portuguese begin cultivating indigo? Ans. In Brazil. Q10. Where did the Spanish begin cultivating indigo? Ans. In Venezuela. Q11. Who was the president of the Indigo Commission? Ans. W.S. Setonkar. Q12. Who gave the extensive description of Caribbean islands? Ans. Jean-Baptiste Labat. Q13. Where did the French begin cultivating indigo? Ans. In Saint-Domingue in the Caribbean islands. Q14. What did the permanent settlement actually mean? Ans. The amount to be paid was fixed permanently, that is, it was not to be increased ever in future. Q15. Which tragedy occurred during 1770 in Bengal? Ans. In 1770 a terrible famine killed 10 million people in Bengal. About 1/3 of the population was wiped out. Q16. What is indigo? Ans. Indigo is a tropical plant which was formerly widely cultivated as a source of dark blue dye. Q17. Who hold the responsibility of paying the revenue in the Mehalwari settlement? Ans. Village headman. Q18. What is common in the two prints, a Kalmakari print and a Morris cotton print? Ans. Both use a rich blue color commonly called indigo. Q19. Where did the slave revolt take place in 1791? Ans. In the French colony of Saint-Domingue situated in the Caribbean islands. The African slaves who worked in plantations rebelled in 1791. Q20. Why did cloth dyers prefer indigo to woad? Ans. As indigo produced a rich blue color, whereas the dye from woad was pale and dull. Q21. Why were Bengal artisans deserting villages? Ans. As they were being forced to sell their goods to the company at low prices. Peasants were unable to pay the dues that were being demanded from them. Q22. What was niche cultivation? O. Explain niche cultivation. Ans. Within the system of niche cultivation, the planter produced indigo in lands that he directly controlled. He either bought the land or rented it from other zamindars and produced indigo by directly employing hired laborers. Q23. What problems did zamindars face under the permanent settlement? Ans. The revenue that had been fixed was so high that the zamindars found it difficult to pay. Anyone who failed to pay the revenue lost his zamindari. Numerous zemindaries were sold off at auctions organized by the company. Q24. What were the causes of Champaran movement? Ans. When Mahatma Gandhi returned from South Africa, a peasant from Bihar persuaded him visit Champaran and see the plight of the indigo cultivators there. Mahatma Gandhi's visit in 1917 marked the beginning of the Champaran movement against the indigo planters. Q25. By the late 19th century, the company forced cultivators in various parts of India to produce which crops? Ans. They forced cultivators to produce other crops: jute in Bengal, tea in Assam, sugarcane in the United Provinces, now Uttar Pradesh, wheat in Punjab, cotton in Maharashtra and Punjab, rice in Madras. Q26. How did indigo trade attract foreign traders? Ans. As the indigo trade grew, commercial agents and officials of the company began investing in indigo production. Over the years, many company officials left their jobs to look after their indigo business. Attracted by the prospect of high profits, numerous Scotsmen and Englishmen came to India and became planters. Q27. Give two problems which arose with the new Munro system of fixing revenue. Ans. Driven by the desire to increase the income from land, revenue officials fixed too high a revenue demand. Peasants were unable to pay, riots fled the countryside, and villages became deserted in many regions. Q28. By the end of the 18th century, the demand for Indian indigo grew further. What were the reasons behind it? Or why did the demand for Indian indigo increase? Ans. Britain began to industrialize, and its cotton production expanded dramatically, creating an enormous new demand for cloth dyes. While the demand for indigo increased, its existing supplies from the West Indies and America collapsed for a variety of reasons. Between 1783 and 1789 the production of indigo in the world fell by half. Cloth dyers in Britain now desperately looked for new sources of indigo supply. Q29. Explain how the Bengal economy landed up in a crisis under the Diwani of the company. Or how did the Bengal economy fell into deep crisis? Ans. After the company became the Diwan of Bengal, it began its efforts to increase the revenue as much as it could and buy fine cotton and silk cloth as cheaply as possible. Within 5 years the value of goods bought by the company in Bengal doubled. Before 1865, the company had purchased goods in India by importing gold and silver from Britain. Now the revenue collected in Bengal could finance the purchase of goods for export. This caused huge loss of revenue for Bengal, which paralyzed its economy. Q30. Why was the Indigo Commission set up by the government? What were its findings and suggestions? Ans. Worried by the rebellion, the government brought in the military to protect the planters from assault, and set up the Indigo Commission to inquire into the system of indigo production. The commission held the planters guilty, and criticized them for the coercive methods they used with indigo cultivators. It declared that indigo production was not profitable for ryots. The commission asked the ryots to fulfill their existing contracts but also told them that they could refuse to produce indigo in future. Q31. What were the consequences of the economic crisis that gripped Bengal? Or state the consequences of the economic crisis that gripped Bengal. Ans. Artisans were deserting villages since they were being forced to sell their goods to the company at low prices. Peasants were unable to pay the dues that were being demanded from them. Artisanal production was in decline, and agricultural cultivation showed signs of collapse. Then in 1770 a terrible famine killed 10 million people in Bengal. About one-third of the population was wiped out. Q32. What was the Blue Rebellion? Ans. In March 1859 thousands of ryots in Bengal refused to grow indigo. This was known as the Blue Rebellion. As the rebellion spread, riots refused to pay rents to the planters, and attacked indigo factories armed with swords and spears, bows and arrows. Women turned up to fight with pots, pans and kitchen implements. Those who worked for the planters were socially boycotted, and the Gomastas, agents of planters who came to collect rent, were beaten up. Riots swore they would no longer take advances to sow indigo nor be bullied by the planters' lathials. Q33. How was the Mahalwari system different from the permanent settlement? Ans. Mahalwari system. Permanent settlement. One Mahalwari system, devised by Holt Mackenzie, came into effect in 1822, in the northwestern provinces of the Bengal Presidency. One Lord Cornwallis introduced the permanent settlement in 1793. 2. The amount to be paid was to be revised periodically, not permanently fixed. 2. The amount to be paid was fixed permanently, that is, it was not to be increased ever in future. 3. The charge of collecting the revenue and paying it to the company was given to the village headman. 3. The charge of collecting the revenue and paying it to the company was given to the Zamindar. Q34. What was the Munro system? O. What was Ryotwari's system? O. What are the main aspects of Ryotwari's system? O. Describe the Munro system. Ans. The new system that was devised came to be known as the Ryotwar, or Ryotwari. It was tried on a small scale by Captain Alexander Reid in some of the areas that were taken over by the company after the wars with Tipu Sultan. Subsequently developed by Thomas Munro, this system was gradually extended all over South India. Reid and Munro felt that in the south there were no traditional zamindars. The settlement, they argued, had to be made directly with the cultivators, ryots, who had tilled the land for generations. Their fields had to be carefully and separately surveyed before the revenue assessment was made. Q35. How was indigo cultivated under the Ryoti system? Ans. Under the Ryoti system, the planters forced the ryots to sign a contract, an agreement, sata. At times they pressurized the village headman to sign the contract on behalf of the ryots. Those who signed the contract got cash advances from the planters at low rates of interest to produce indigo. But the loan committed the ryot to cultivating indigo on at least 25% of the area under his holding. The planter provided the seed and the drill, while the cultivators prepared the soil, sowed the seed and looked after the crop. When the crop was delivered to the planter after the harvest, a new loan was given to the ryot, and the cycle started all over again. Q36. What were the problems faced by the planters in the NIJ system? O. What were the problems with niche cultivation? O. Why were planters reluctant to expand the area under niche cultivation till the late 19th century? Ans. The planters found it difficult to expand the area under niche cultivation. Indigo could be cultivated only on fertile lands, and these were all already densely populated. Only small plots scattered over the landscape could be acquired. Planters needed large areas in compact blocks to cultivate indigo in plantations. Nor was labor easy to mobilize. A large plantation required a vast number of hands to operate, and labor was needed precisely at a time when peasants were usually busy with their rice cultivation. Niche cultivation on a large scale also required many plows and bullocks. Investing on purchase and maintenance of plows was a big problem. Q37. Why did the indigo cultivators decide to rebel? How did they show their anger? Oh, why did the indigo cultivators decide to rebel? Oh, why did the indigo peasants decide they would no longer remain silent? Ans. The condition under which the indigo cultivators had to work was intensely oppressive. Finally, they decided not to grow indigo. They became united and rebelled. They showed their anger in the following ways. Riots refused to pay rents to the planters, and attacked indigo factories armed with swords and spears, bows and arrows. Women turned up to fight with pots, pans and kitchen implements. 3. Those who worked for the planters were socially boycotted, and the Gomastas, agents of planters who came to collect rent, were beaten up. 4. Riots swore they would no longer take advances to sow indigo nor be bullied by the planters' latials. Not investing in the improvement of land. The revenue that had been fixed was so high that the zamindars found it difficult to pay. Q38. Describe the main features of the permanent settlement. Oh, what were the terms of the permanent settlement? Ans. The company finally introduced the permanent settlement in 1793. By the terms of the settlement, the Rajas and Tlugdars were recognized as zamindars. They were asked to collect rent from the peasants and pay revenue to the company. The amount to be paid was fixed permanently, that is, it was not to be increased ever in future. It was felt that this would ensure a regular flow of revenue into the company's coffers and at the same time encourage the zamindars to invest in improving the land. Since the revenue demand of the state would not be increased, the zamindar would benefit from increased production from the land.